The episodes will either be interesting or problematic. I'll say, well, what's interesting is, and then David will be like, well, tell me about what do you think, guys? And I'll be like, well, what's interesting is, and then we'll give it a number and we'll all go home.
I can bring you in warm, or if I can bring you in cold.
Hello, welcome to Galactic Initiative. I'm your host, Jeff. Today, David, Sean, and I will be discussing Chapter 6 of The Mandalorian, The Prisoner, the first show of 2021. Welcome, David.
Hello, sir.
Welcome, Sean.
Hello, my friend. Let's
begin. The Razor Crest lands in a cluttered hangar that is part of a larger ship or station. It's impossible to tell from this scene. Din Djarin exits and a man named Ranzar Mulk, played by Mark Boone Jr., calls to him. Within seconds, we understand the two men have history. Ran is more comfortable with the Mando than any character to this point. He frequently enters the Mando's personal space with a handshake, an arm around his shoulder, a whispered exchange, etc. For work, it seems Din has reached out to Ran, who outlines a job that requires the Razor Crest, a surprising and irritating condition based on the bounty hunter's reaction. But Ran holds firm, no ship, no job. He knows about the trouble with the guild, so he assumes a level of desperation for the Mando. Ran will continue to withhold relevant info and push uncomfortable terms on Din in sleazy, irritating ways. Apparently, a long-standing policy of Ran's leadership is no questions. The bounty hunter will turn this policy against Ran later.
When I first saw this, the Razor Crest flying in, I thought of the Freemakers Lego show, but it really brought me back to Star Wars. There's a lot of there was a lot of metal construction going on, and I love Ran. Every time I see the guy, I think of Batman Begins, and I love the character. The beard says he's been through a lot, and him and Mando have a story that's already kind of built in. But just how immersed I felt in this episode, specifically in this cargo bay, was pure Star Wars, pure sci-fi. It was awesome. I did have a couple of issues. The cuts started off on the ground level, then they went to the top, the catwalk, and then all of a sudden they're back down by the Razor Crest again. But for me to be, I guess, a little nitpicky is hard. This was by far my favorite episode of the entire series.
The setup of Din Djarin's on the run. He's kind of desperate for work. He needs the cash, and he's going to the place where he probably shouldn't go, but it's the only place that he has left, which is to his past. His interactions with Ran and eventually the others. We start to learn some things about Din Djarin that seem a little bit out of place. He's trying to live a better, different life and have a little more honor and a better code of ethics. But we're shown here, Din has done some things, and he's probably not too proud of them. To Jeff's point, there is a familiarity here with Bad Santa, and he's, again, even under the helmet, we can tell that he's not entirely comfortable with this whole situation. He just wants to work and wants to move on. He's not coming home, so to speak. He's not trying to come back here and re-ingratiate himself into this particular lifestyle, but he's definitely, he's starting to regret it. In the first couple of minutes, like, he gets off the ship and they're like, yeah, we need your ship. And he's like, hey, wait, we don't do that here. Nope, it's either the ship or no cash. And so now he's kind of backed himself into a corner, and he will continue to regret this choice throughout the rest of the episode.
There's one. Set for stun.
I liked it. I felt that the set, the space station, I mean, other than the fact that it looked like the one in Wrath of Khan a little bit, it was a cool, it's a cool idea, running a criminal ring out of an orbital station and whatnot. And feels like this particular moment when the Razor Crest parks and that set feels more robust than some of the sets that we've seen in previous episodes. So yeah, it definitely feels, like David said, it definitely feels Star Warsy.
The environment of the hangar, why the hangar over the other locations?
For me, it was used, and you could kind of feel the history, and it's a workstation. It's, like any shop. It's not new. It's rough. It wasn't sand. It wasn't. It was outer space. I think that was the other cool part about it.
It reminded me of the hangar on Hoth. There's a hustle and bustle there, a lot of activity. There's ships, there's parts, there's welding, there's sparks, there's all stuff going on. That whole set in Empire Strikes Back to me was just so impressive. I mean, you had the full size Millennium Falcon parked in there, and all these people running around, all the extras, all the stuff. This whole hangar bay situation definitely evoked a lot of that for me. It was a working world. It was hustle bustle, and some of these sets feel like sets. This one felt like you were in world.
We've learned about the engine that they used to create this, and you think about, like Sean mentioned, with the Empire Strikes Back and how much work and time went into building those sets. With the environment that they have now created, I think how much money they saved and how advanced we've become and what's in store for us later on. We'll be able to get good quality movies and shows, I think, by using this engine. You know, you go back to episodes 1, 2, and 3 where everything was blue screen and, you know, it was very challenging for the actors to be able to work with. I mean, the fact that they can physically see all this stuff around them, I love it. I cannot say enough about these first 4 or 5 minutes of this episode, and this environment right here that we're starting off with is amazing.
As initially explained, the job is a 5-person rescue mission for an associate who ran afoul of some competitors and got himself caught. Rand introduces the other group members one by one. First, we meet Mayfeld, played by comedian Bill Burr, a former Imperial sharpshooter who will act as Rand's proxy.
I had never even heard of Bill Burr. I've since watched a lot of his stuff, and I find him to be absolutely hilarious. Perfect casting for this part, and I would love to see him in many other Star Wars adventures later on.
Yeah, I think he's great. I think he was acerbic enough as a member of a criminal organization. He's got his attitude, and he's clearly not cut out for Imperial work. And I like the fact that there are actual sharpshooters in the Empire, because stormtroopers are garbage. You know, and then of course there's the whole joke. I wasn't a stormtrooper, wise ass. Anyway, interesting character. Again, I have no frame of reference for Bill Burr. I've never seen any of his stuff, so I didn't get a lot of the excitement about him being in the episode. When other famous people get tapped for Star Wars roles, it concerns me. A lot of people bring in things that shouldn't necessarily be there, and it could be problematic. So there's obviously room for humor in everything, but these are supposed to be action adventure, not comedy drama.
Any concerns about the reference to the sequel trilogy, Canto Bite?
I was hoping we wouldn't have to talk about that, but yes, I'm very upset about Canto Bite. Canto Bite is a dark spot on the franchise, and I don't even want to talk about it. You can take my fist and put it through that beautiful reference.
Next, we meet Berg, played by Clancy Brown, a Deveronian, and Q90, a reprogrammed protocol droid. Berg tries to physically intimidate Mando, while Zero explains its superiority in response time and intelligence over organic life forms. Xi'an, a female Twi'lek, played by Natalia Tena, is the final crew member. She holds a knife to Mando's throat in a dramatic entrance. We sense scorn, perhaps rejection, for Mando's choice to leave her company long ago. Rand prods the two as lovebirds, an interesting thought considering the Mandalorian way. How would that relationship work?
The Kurgan, he's a total badass. I like his character. I like the fact that he's sort of the meathead muscle of the group. It's nice to see, again, a callback to episode 4, and that some of the Cantina creatures are not just one-off. You know, they're actual species throughout the galaxy that we're going to see more of. The robot plays on the dynamic of Din Djarin being angry about robots for reasons that are valid. This particular character is trying to be a cross between C-3PO and like the Terminator. Wasn't necessarily working.
000?
Well, that's the other thing, is that you're calling him Zero. There is a murder droid in the comic books, the Dr. Aphra comics, called 000. And if anybody wants to listen to our other show about our favorite villains, David will talk at length about that. That it felt a little too close to that reference as well, and I almost feel like, well, why don't you just bring in 000? But putting out its interface, its hand or whatever, and showing it to the Mando is kind of a heavy-handed foreshadowing piece. Like, you're going to need to know about this because later this is going to be important in the episode. I wasn't as happy about the droid, but I'm not like David. I'm not anti-droid. They were trying to mash together too many previous things in the Star Wars universe instead of create something new. It kind of looked a little bit like Forlom and or Zuckuss, and it sounded a little bit like an angry version of 3PO, and it was modeled after 000 and even given almost the same name. So that was a little rough, but I mean, ultimately, the interactions that the Mandalorian has with all these individuals, he disparages the Imperial because he's got some issues with the Empire as well. He's not intimidated by the big guy. And then, of course, he's got this whole ex-girlfriend situation. You talk about it, what is this? How does this work with the way and all this stuff? And a lot of jokes have been made online. It's like, well, clearly he doesn't take his helmet off. Wink, wink. The more I watch it, the more I kind of feel like she might have been trying to channel a little bit of DC Cinematic Universe Harley Quinn, crazy lover, killer. But I get the feeling that, as we get into this episode and as we're introduced to the crew and Ran and the people that Din Djarin used to roll with, I feel like Din Djarin may have stumbled off the path a little bit, had a wild streak in his youth or something. Because he was a foundling. He was rescued by Death Watch. He was raised. He was, inculcated in the ways of fundamentalist Mandalorianism. But he clearly went off and did some things, clearly some bad things. I mean, they make a reference in there where he viewed jobs not as jobs, but as target practice. So I don't know, did Din Djarin step away from the path and then return to it? Because I'm getting this sense from this interaction and these introductions and the references that these people make that he was several steps removed from any sort of code of ethics or honor or anything like that. Perhaps Din Djarin is a born-again Mandalorian.
Well, for me, Xi'an is one of my favorite characters in this entire series. Right up there with Quill. I think mainly because she's got that craziness. You just want to, you want to know more about her. From the opening scene where she pops in and she's flipping that knife around and sticks it to Mando and like, I'm going to cut your head off. Pretty cool. Add a lot to the character and a lot, as far as I'm concerned, to the gang. Berg, I know that he was in, was it A New Hope as a background character, but I think his color wasn't red. You basically have a devil-like creature in the crew. He's carrying around this huge tub of who knows what, and you assume something heavy, so you immediately get the impression this guy is pretty strong, so you really don't want to mess with him.
Do you know what's going on?
Tangent. The actor Clancy Brown has done a lot of things with Star Wars. He's been the voice of several characters in the animated shows.
Savage Press.
Savage Press, yep, Savage Press. And Ryder from Rebels. It would seem that he's a fan. Yeah, he's really good. But I actually, until I saw the credits, I didn't realize it was him. So
that's interesting, because as soon as he started talking, I knew it was him.
Same deep voice, tiny. I didn't get it. It wasn't until the end.
For me, him being the police officer in Shawshank, if I'm flipping through the channels and I come across Shawshank, I just stop and watch it. And he was, obviously an integral part in that movie, and that's where I got it from.
Guy's had a career.
Oh, he has, yeah, for sure. But his voice in this episode is very much like the character, the Kurgan from Highlander. That's where I knew him from first, before Shawshank, before all this other stuff. Yeah, as soon as he started talking, I was like, oh yeah, that's my guy.
But the robot, I totally agree with a lot of what Sean said. It reminded me a lot of 000, and I the robot was okay.
I like Zero. I guess I'm alone in that. I didn't get the murder vibe. The droid is armed and he'll try to use a weapon later in the episode. But to riff on C3PO, Forlom, and Zuckuss in one character, I think that's pretty cool. Protocol droid with a layer of espionage and criminal.
He looks like a spider, or not a spider, fly.
A fly or a grasshopper. Yeah. I liked the take on droids.
No, I wasn't unhappy with. Again, this is probably, like we've said, one of the best episodes in the season, and these are minor nitpicks, and I know our fans get upset with us because we rip stuff and then we give it a high number, but it's just these are the things that were going through my mind when I saw it. I was like, oh, that reminds me of that. Reminds me of that. It didn't necessarily mean that I didn't like the droid or that it took me out of the show and I was throwing my my remote on the ground and being like, damn you, Disney. But if you're going to introduce a droid to the crew, trying to make it as unique as possible, because we're going to get a lot of droids throughout this episode, and some of them are direct ripoffs of things that have come before, and some are new-ish or newer. So why not make the wheelman different too?
Zero locates Grief Karga's message to the Mando regarding the child. An ominous moment, but one that does not pay off this season. While further explaining the job, Mayfeld tries to pass off a New Republic maximum security prison ship as a fortified transport ship, which alerts the Mando to his true peril. Rand's associate was arrested, not captured by competing mercenaries. Rand has been lying by omission from the start. Din Djarin expresses reservations, but Mayfeld and Rand brush them aside. To win the Mando's cooperation, Xi'an points out the prison ship is staffed by droids. The uncomfortable terms continue. Zero must pilot the Razor Crest to perform the split-second maneuvers necessary to board the prison ship without detection. The Mando is upset, but he acquiesces, and the plan moves forward. As the Razor Crest departs, we see the hangar as part of a small space station called the Roost.
It goes to show you a little bit about how the shields in Star Wars work. It's a lot better than all of a sudden dropping out of hyperspace right on top of the ship and then connecting. And with the Mando and finding out and figuring out what was going on in terms of breaking this person out, once you're on the ship, you're pretty much committed. And I think he realizes that.
It seems like a fairly elaborate setup to try and get on to the New Republic prison ship. The Mando is, again, clearly regretting all of the choices that he's made in this episode. The job isn't what he thought it was. He's starting to find out that the target isn't what he thought it was. And now I'm sure he's probably wondering, who are we actually going after at this point? He's been told it is a colleague, quote unquote. But basically, he's been trying to avoid notoriety or attention by any of the ruling authorities. And this week it's the New Republic. Last week it was the Empire. But generally, he's been trying to stay off of everyone's screens. And now he's thrown in on a mission to attack or otherwise capture something very important to the New Republic. So he's probably doing some mental gymnastics right now and trying to figure out how he's going to get out of this and survive. He's starting to feel like there's going to be a turn here somewhere, that he's going to have to not only keep an eye out for whatever it is on this ship that they're going to be taking, but he also needs to keep an eye on his back, so to speak. So having said all that, I think that the diagram that they give of the flight path of the ship, I know it's a plot device that we need in order to have the robot driving the ship and all the things that means in this episode. But I feel like you can just jam communications. It seems like a rather elaborate ruse to try and get on board the ship. The message from Grief Karga, like Jeff said, I don't think it really pays anything off. I don't think it's really impactful in the larger narrative. You think it might be. There's a lot of people looking for the child. The child is on the Razor Crest, and the Razor Crest is going into a difficult and very hazardous situation. we're wondering if, maybe all these guys with the fobs are going to show up later in the episode because the Zero droid is going to contact someone or maybe even reach out to Grief Karga himself. But it feels like it was almost unnecessary in a way. I don't know. It seems like an extra element that wasn't necessary in this episode.
With each passing scene, I gained greater appreciation for the cast. It's one of my favorite things about the episode. On the heels of just meeting the characters and putting the group together, this scene and the one that follows it really pulled everything together, cemented it, and then it just became fun as the episode went on. While flying to the rendezvous coordinates, Rand's crew antagonizes Din Djarin. Berg's snooping almost leads to a fight. Mayfeld pokes fun at the Mandalorians as great warriors. The friction with Xi'an and the idea of never removing one's helmet. Xi'an brings up an old job on Alzak 3, an obvious sore spot. The tension just builds and builds until the hidden child is accidentally revealed by Mando pushing Berg into the vac tube. Then the child becomes a source of insults from Mayfeld. He mocks Xi'an and Mando. Did you two make that? A fortunate turn for the ill-mannered riders. Zero drops the sublight and executes sharp turns that toss everyone about the cargo area. The Razor Crest lands on the prison ship without detection.
I think they dive deeper into their past jobs and Xi'an and Mando and their potential relationship. And I do realize that Mayfeld is just trying to get underneath both of their skins. Great scene between the, 5 of them. Just does a lot more character building. Mayfield cracking jokes and trying to feel him out to find out what type of a person Mando is, since he's never had to deal with him before.
So there's a lot of interesting conversation that goes on between these characters. It gives more depth, I guess, to Din Djarin. The whole conversation around the Mandalorians, for example, the one hand being mocked for being great warriors and on the other hand being mocked for having been wiped out by the Empire. We are trying to provoke a reaction from the Mandalorian at this point. I think that this crew, recognizing the Mandalorian as an outsider, he's getting the hazing. I thought it was hilarious when Mayfeld starts clowning Din Djarin and he might be a Gungan and gives him the old Misa no think so. And we're getting these references, the Alzak 3 thing, to pull from games and from expanded universe stuff. I thought it was something in the Clone Wars, but whatever. Turns out to be a different planet. It's not direct backstory. It's sort of a adjacent backstory, but there's a lot of comments. There's a lot of things, and Din Djarin's like, well, I did what I had to do there, and we don't really know what's they're talking around. Something clearly happened on that job, and they're talking around it, and there's a lot going on there just in those few moments before we drop out of hyperspace and everybody falls over. But the other thing is with Grogu, and they're playing with him and they're treating him like a pet, and the fact that the Mando doesn't really do anything about it. Maybe he's worried that because these people are criminal element tied to the underworld, that they would have dealings with, the guild. So he's trying to not do anything overt or react in such a way that would tip them off that the child is of great value. And so, but it seemed a little bit out of character for me that Din Djarin wouldn't break everybody for messing with Baby Yoda.
I had the same thought, but his best move is to downplay the connection with Baby Yoda by treating the child as a pet. He's actually protecting it. I believe that he can take everyone on his ship, given that he has the controls. As Berg is snooping, he finds the weapons cache, and everything on the Razor Crest is synced to Mando's forearm sheaths to his armor, which is very cool. But his way to shield the child, obviously he didn't want the child discovered, but now that the child's been discovered, played off like, yeah, that's my pet. And then as they try to make something more of it to see if it's a sore spot for him, I think he's not going to give them that angle. You can't bully me with this. You can't hold this over my head. When Mayfeld pretended to drop the child, I expected some sort of reaction. So I guess the issues with the ship coming out of hyperspace and having to perform all the weird maneuvers saved him from having to assault Mayfeld. This scene, further evidence of Rick Famuyiwa's talent, great directing, great acting. It's very easy to dislike the crew. It's tense a dozen times, and the tension's still there. And that's when you know you're creating something really special. After Mando slices a hatch mechanism, Mayfeld ducks his head inside as a few security droids pass. Zero stays on the Razor Crest to act as a spy and guide for the infiltrators. The others enter the ship. First step, go to the control room. Berg shoots a mouse droid, thereby attracting security droids. Mando shows his combat prowess by dispatching 6 droids as Mayfeld signals his crewmates to stay out of the fight.
The whole scene is it's moving the plot along. It's advancing the story. We're getting the sneak and peek kind of section of the show here. We're executing the heist. We're moving around on the ship. Obviously, the Berg doesn't show critical thinking skills because shooting the mouse droid is what is going to alert everyone to your presence on the ship. Mayfeld is holding people back from assisting the Mando, and again, it's building now to where you're feeling more and more like they're hoping that the droids will do the job that you start to get the feeling that we're building towards the betrayal. The Mando's there, was really there for the ship. We got the ship, and the ship got us here. Now he's a liability.
Just takes one person to alert the authorities, that crazy kid in the bunch, and he definitely sounded the alarm. But as they're walking by, they're looking in some of the cells, and you do see a creature that looks like Rio from Solo, an Ardinian. Pretty cool, nice little callback.
It's been pointed out by many different shows, the hatch to enter the prison ship looks just like the hatch of the Millennium Falcon.
Oh yeah, that was cool. The ship kind of it feels a little bit abandoned. It's a little weird. The calm before the storm kind of thing. Obviously, then everything goes to hell when they shoot the mouse droid. But the coloration, the white walls and whatnot, and sort of that design cue, a little Tantive 4-esque. It's true to the aesthetic that we've seen before, which I like. Nothing wrong with a little consistency. But the droids that show up with the the New Republic logo, they kind of look a little bit like K2SO, sort of the sentry droid, whatnot. There's an Imperial officer in there in one of the cells. There's good stuff there.
Everyone in the crew has a role. Mayfeld's the trigger man. Zero flies the ship, monitors the action. Berg is the muscle. Mando, in addition to his fighting skill, Mando seems to be the tech guy. They land the Razor Crest safely on the prison ship, and then it's up to Mando to crack the code, open the hatch. Mando's like the slicer. It's interesting.
That's a good observation because, yeah, there doesn't seem like anybody else in the crew is really equipped to deal with the technical aspects of the breakout. He's the one who figures out the interfaces and the droids and, how to use controls for the ship and locking things out and doors. And you would think that the droid would be in charge of all that stuff, especially since he has a built-in interface piece that he's so want to show off in this episode.
During this battle scene, I wrote this down. The first few shots that were taken bounce off the droids pretty easily. But I did notice that later on in the episode, it just took one blast. Come on, just keep the continuity going.
Continuity issue.
Yeah, he hits him multiple times. Not that it just bounces right off. And then Mando comes up from behind and just starts knifing him.
Move along. Move along.
The control room is manned by one frightened New Republic soldier played by Matt Lanter, the voice of Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars. Mayfeld locates their target's cell. The soldier pulls a tracking beacon from his belt. The audience learns through Mayfeld the beacon will draw a New Republic attack team if activated. Shion kills the soldier named Davin with a throwing knife as Mando is trying to negotiate a peaceful resolution. Unfortunately for the mercenaries, the soldier's dying act was turning on the beacon. Now Zero tells them they have approximately 20 minutes before New Republic forces arrive.
The scene lasted way too long. If you really wanted to show these guys have a killer instinct, you would have cut it maybe by 75% and just having her kill the guy. It really drug on for me.
I didn't feel that way about this particular scene. I mean, we had to establish a couple of things. We had to understand what the beacon was about. We had to understand what the consequences were of the actions that were about to be taken. You can't just roll in there and kill the guy, and then at the end of the episode, a bunch of X-Wings show up, and we're like, well, what does this mean?
Why can't you roll in and just kill him? I mean, we already know it's a rebel ship. We already know what a beacon looks like. Cut it in half at least.
We also have to reestablish that the Mando has a conscience and that he's not a cold-blooded killer anymore. We have to prove to the audience that he's not like these people, and so we have to get into the standoff situation, where he's trying to protect the life of the New Republic guy who's just trying to do his job. I don't know. I don't think that it wasn't necessarily a gratuitous cameo by the guy who plays Anakin Skywalker. I mean, the scene, I didn't feel like it was overlong. I felt it was necessary. We continue to show the lethality and the underhanded and evil ways of the crew. It didn't, I mean, complaining about overlong scenes in episodes that are 20 minutes, that's not right. I'll take anything that prolongs at this point because the episodes are way too short.
Come on, move on. We all know what's going to happen.
No, obviously, who does what in this moment is it has consequences. It is, like I said, at the beginning of this episode, we talked about how the Mando had a checkered past and did a lot of bad things, and he's a bad man. But this is after we have met him when he is on this path of having a code and having honor and all these other things. So his integrity or his ethics are called into question at the beginning of the episode, and the fact that he throws in with this group and starts to do a job with them could lead to regressing in his behavior. But then we get into the scene where the Mandalorian is like, there's no need to kill an innocent bystander. He didn't do anything to us. And, oh, by the way, if we do, it's just going to make our situation even worse. So let's just skip it and try and work something out. It establishes the fact that he's on the other side of the line from the people in this crew who are clearly bad people and really don't care about anything.
I'll agree with David. Well, I'll agree with him on one point, and I'll remind him of a point that he hasn't yet made. In the confusion, I know there's a moment maybe you don't pull the trigger, but you need to take out the soldier as quickly as possible so that no alert can be signaled. So I agree with David on that point. Point that David hasn't yet made, but drawing from previous episode, what happened to Stun? Rather than put a knife in his neck, why doesn't someone switch a blaster to Stun and just knock him out?
It reinforces our dislike for the crew. Using Stun would be, something. I don't know, that would imply that these people, have some kind of moral center, that they're not to say opposed to killing, but they're opposed to unnecessary killing. My thing is, you have still left behind so much evidence of your crime of breaking the person off the ship that you're going to be tracked down. I mean, Trapper Wolf is going to find you. Okay, he's going to find you.
You're right. The point of killing him is the stark contrast between the Mando and the other members of the crew. Yeah, for sure. But what if Mando had stunned him?
Well, if Mando had stunned him, then it would serve the same purpose. It would establish that he's a good person. He has a moral center, and it would have moved the plot along and achieved the goals that they needed to achieve.
I really want to understand why he is wearing Imperial Stormtrooper boots. Curious about that.
The New Republic officer?
Yes.
Well, he's also wearing an Alderanian militia helmet. So, hey, put these on, put that on. Hey, look, you're a New Republic guy.
I wish they would. I mean, if that's really what they did, which would not shock me because I do know we're on a budget here. it's disappointing because the boots, you could put just a black pair of shoes on. So
well, there was a joke. Hey, nice boots. But the blue, the boots, the helmet, I was not impressed with this costume.
Like you say, the concern about heading towards the sequel trilogy is real because his coat style is not unlike the New Republic / Resistance military coats in the sequel trilogy. It's a different color. It's not olive green, it's blue. But the boots thing, who made the joke about the boots? Was it Mayfeld?
Yes.
So then maybe it is a reference because he's an Imperial or former Imperial. This guy's wearing Imperial shoes. That's something I didn't even notice. It went right over my head, but I know because David is a 501st Trooper, he owns a pair of those, so I'll give him credit for noticing the footwear. But it calls so many things into question. Is this guy an ex-Imperial who now works for the New Republic? Is this a situation of
like I'm on the unemployment line and I need a job? So as I am.
No, this is kind of like the Marshall Plan problem, the rebuilding of occupied Europe. You employ the people who can get the job done, no matter what uniform they used to be wearing when the war ended. Yeah, I have no idea. It's not the best uniform ever, but you understand that this guy is a quote-unquote rebellion / New Republic person. He doesn't have to wear a big symbol on his shirt like they had to do with the droids, just so everybody could make sure that they knew that they weren't separatist battle droids or whatever, or Imperial somethings. But I feel like that helmet gets misinterpreted as a rebellion thing when it's actually Alderaan, because there was the Tantive 4 and then a couple of dudes in the background at the medal ceremony on Yavin. And obviously Princess Leia is from Alderaan, and Alderaanians are very much involved in the rebellion. So maybe this guy's uniform is cobbled together from a bunch of stuff. Who knows? I mean, there seems to be a lot of conversation in the show about how they're kind of a joke anyway. So maybe, I don't know, maybe this plays into it.
The connection with Mayfeld and stormtroopers makes sense, but maybe this is an inside joke with the crew. I don't know. It's an odd choice, though. It definitely is.
I think we're maybe being a little bit too nitpicky, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe we are being nitpicky, but we're nerds and that's what we do. So why can't you jam the beacon signal communication?
Is it something similar to the fob?
Because the fob clearly beeps when it's close to you, right? And it can only beep from, and if it's low tech, it can only beep from a certain distance away. But it seems like every time they land somewhere, 10 dudes show up and you're like halfway across the galaxy. You've been going light speed for a couple of days, yet somehow somebody manages their thing starts beeping. Again, these are questions that we have about how does stuff work in universe. And it's rule setting. I don't care how it works, but it's got to work consistently.
Move along. Move along.
Berg destroys 2 security droids through brute force on the way to the prisoner's cell. Inside the cell is a male Twi'lek named Quinn, played by Ismael Cruz Cordova, who blames the Mando for his imprisonment, saying he was left behind. Berg punches Mando into the cell, and Mayfeld seals the door. As it turns out, Quinn is Shion's brother. Betrayal complete, the crew leaves Mando to make its escape. 10 minutes to go. So,
first of all, the droids that he blows up are droids that we saw in Episode 4 that the Jawas brought to the Lars family homestead to sell. Except these hover, the one in Episode 4 had, I believe, treads on it. And it's the exact same droid, which is kind of fun. Another callback. But the betrayal here now, we start to see the payoffs of some of the actions and the conversations and the things that have gone on in the episode before. So when they're on the Razor Crest, they are talking about what they're going to do with Baby Yoda when the mission's over, with making the assumption that the Mando isn't going to be around. We also have the already exposed lies at the beginning from Ran about my my colleague who was taken by a rival cartel or whatever, which when we immediately find out it's actually the New Republic. So we start to see these, and then there's the conversation about, the mission that went wrong. So now, we get the full payoff of this. It turns out, or we can infer that the mission was what ultimately wound up getting Quinn imprisoned or captured or something along those lines, or he's been in custody for a long time. But again, the animosity from the ex-girlfriend now becomes even more clear. It's not just that they broke up, it's that he got her brother behind bars. And now the big thing is we've rescued him, we've got him out of jail. Now we can, have our vengeance on the Mando. It becomes again clear why we're acting recklessly, drawing attention to this rescue mission by shooting the guard and blowing things up and generally causing mayhem and alerting the New Republic that this is going on, is because they want the Mando to be taken into custody at the end of this. And so we get a lot of answers or a lot of explanation for a lot of the things that have gone forth in this episode to this moment. The sibling thing is cool. It's again seeing another Twi'lek and all that is awesome. I love the character design on this guy. The scars on his face are cool. The way that they're done. His character definitely has this presence. When he comes out of that cell, he immediately kind of becomes the leader because he starts giving orders like, "This is how we're going to get out of here. This is what we're going to do." This and that. It's a good scene, good stuff. Pays off a lot of things in the first half of the episode.
Oh, one of the things I actually really enjoyed was Burke picking up that droid and hucking at the other one, and then flexing at the end. Basically, he was like, "Yeah, no problem, just stretching myself out," and everybody else was like, "Man, that was awesome. That was pretty cool scene for me." I mean, Sean kind of covered most, if not all, the nuances of it, but definitely helps with the development of the gang, the old crew background story that they had already started to develop.
Quinn, I love the design of the head tails and the scars, but the tank top and the weird pants, I'm just not into it. I think they could have done a better job there.
Prison issued.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Everyone's wearing something different. The Imperial officer still had his uniform on, and clearly everyone's been in New Republic custody, so they don't even bother to switch you to the orange jumpsuit. They don't, and that's weird. And yeah, the tank top and the pants just didn't work for me. But as Sean said, signals, clues leading up to, this is the moment of betrayal, and it takes Mando by surprise.
It shows the Mando once again getting caught up in a situation that it seems like everyone else, including the audience, saw coming, kind of walks into the trap. And it's not like in this episode there was not one single clue for the Mando to see. There might have been things that we as the audience were allowed to observe as voyeur, but no, he was full on lied to at the briefing at the beginning of this. And the fact that he's worked with a lot of these people before and knows what they're capable of. I mean, he should have been eyes open on this mission, but in the words of Tarkin, you're far too trusting.
Din Djarin uses his wrist grappler to drag a security droid to his cell door. He rips off its blaster arm and shoots it in the head. Then he uses the droid's computer interface arm to open his cell door. Rather than pursue his old friends, the Mando heads to the control room to seal off the crew's escape route, jam Zero's surveillance, turn on red emergency lighting in some sections, and turn off all lighting in other sections. Basically, he divides and traps his adversaries.
Pretty clever. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was struggling once he got in the cell. I was struggling to figure out a way for him to get out, and using his grappling hook and grabbing the robot and grabbing his arm and ripping it off, because even non-Wookiees can do that. I guess if there was one small issue, and that would be with an interface being inside the cell. But if he knows he's not going to be able to catch the crew getting back to the ship, go to the next best place, and that is the control center, and just start locking things down, turning off the lights, and doing all the different things so that he gave himself an opportunity to be able to get out.
The oil effect was bad on the droids. They should have just done it with real splatters on the door, because it looked kind of like the R2 scene in Revenge of the Sith. David brings up an excellent point. I hadn't really considered this, but yeah, why is there a lock or a keyhole on the inside of the cell? Other than that, good scene. I liked the resourcefulness of the Mandalorian, the fast thinking. Another payoff from earlier in the episode when we saw Zero flash his little interface thing out of his wrist. Getting to the control room and doing all that. Well, I mean that's what Rey would do, right? It's a way to even the odds, divide and conquer. And again, we've seen how the Mando can track in the dark. He's laying his trap now. They've had their shot. And then this is sort of where the episode turns from the heist film to the horror movie. The flashing red lights and the darkness and the stalking of your prey, and hiding in the corners and all that kind of good stuff. So, yeah, it's a great transition in the episode. Everything is shifted now. The Mandalorian's on the hunt.
The child appears behind Zero in the Razor Crest's cockpit, but disappears when the droid reaches for its laser rifle. Quinn tells Shion and Berg to split up and kill the Mando while he and Mayfeld go for the Razor Crest. Quinn is willing to let his sister be killed or captured as long as he escapes. He takes one of Mayfeld's pistols before promising triple share and sending Mayfeld after the Mando too. So with the advantage of superior numbers gone, 3 mercenaries attempt to find and kill the bounty hunter. Not smart. Zero begins to search the Razor Crest for the child.
Horrible decision to split up. You never split up. Power in numbers, not a smart move.
Yeah, we immediately go from Quinn having this presence of leadership with the team to questioning why he has this presence of leadership with the team, because he's not giving the best advice on how to pursue the Mandalorian. What he should be doing is recalling all of his people together into one place so they can have the strength in numbers. The other thing, I don't understand Mayfeld in this moment. He has now witnessed Quinn saying, I don't care if my sister's caught or captured as long as, I get off the ship. And then he says, and I'll give you a triple share if you go and get the bad guy, for me. And does Mayfeld, how can he rationalize that he's not being thrown into the mill? He's not being sacrificed to get Quinn off the ship as well. Yeah, he makes this promise of triple share, but it's like, dude, first of all, you got to survive. You've already seen the Mando. He's managed to destroy a whole bunch of droids, the security guard droids, by himself, even though you guys let him do it by himself because you thought he was going to get killed. Then you threw him in a cell thinking you had incapacitated him by locking him up. Yet he's managed to escape within like 10 minutes of that, and he's stalking you now. But you're just going to run back in there by yourself. You're going to take the Mando and you're going to get triple share? I don't think so. And at this point, Mayfeld, who is an unrepentant, wise ass and independent thinker up to this point in the episode, has suddenly become a follower. He should have just told Quinn, like, forget that, buddy. I'm getting off of here with you too. You can keep your share. I'd rather keep my life today. Let's go. And then when you get back to Regular One with Bad Santa, you say, I quit this crew. I'm done with you guys. Because clearly he was going to be sacrificed to the Mando. But instead he's like, oh, triple share? Yeah, hell yeah. And he runs off into the dark to meet his fate. So there's a moment here where we're getting a lot of bad choices and bad advice.
Well, common sense would say if Quinn's willing to sacrifice his own sister, what do you think, Kevin? Do you really think he cares about you? He's going to sacrifice you right there with him. Come on, get a clue.
Exactly. The only thing preventing him from sacrificing you would be your relationship with Ran, the fact that you're in charge of the mission, but that's not going to stand up. And let's not forget, he also takes one of Mayfeld's pistols, pulls it right out of the holster on the chest, and Mayfeld says and does nothing. It's very strange. Yeah, Mayfeld loses his edge completely in this scene and wanders off like an idiot to be taken by Mando. It just doesn't. Quinn should not be in charge. No one should be listening to him. And Mayfeld 180 as a character.
Well, it makes Mayfeld's character completely inconsistent, actually, when you think about it now, because Quinn busts out of his cell and he starts giving orders and everybody starts following. You would think that Mayfeld, who had, I guess, been established as the leader of the mission, he should be saying, oh, hey, now, wait a minute, my friend. Let's talk about this. I'm in charge here. I'm getting you off this ship, but snap to, son, I'm in charge. And then they could have had some, testosterone-filled moment where they're staring each other down and establishing, the dominance of the group or whatever. But yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense. He falls right in line with Quinn's orders and then allows Quinn to pull a gun out of his holster. And it seems like Mayfeld starts off very loud and becomes very quiet by the end.
Yeah, Quinn comes out of the cell and he just melts.
Maybe he's got a thing for Twi'leks. I don't blame him.
It's the tank top. He saw the tank
totally
top.
the tank top. He saw those pecs.
He was overwhelmed.
I mean, he's a specimen, right? It's the parachute pants. That's why he has that costume. You see, this is why we're here. They put him in those pants and that top simply because they knew it would distract Mayfeld.
As Berg approaches the control room, Din Djarin seals the hallway, thereby trapping the Devaronian with him. Mando attacks Berg with his wrist grappler from a hiding place above the ceiling. Berg yanks down the Mando and begins to beat him. The blaster pistol and whistling birds are knocked aside. The flamethrower has no effect. Berg fixates on removing the Mando's helmet and gets flipped towards the door. A thrown knife brings the door down on the brute, but with superhuman strength, Berg squats the heavy metal gate. He laughs as he lifts, thinking he will win. The Mando presses a button that slams an extra set of blast doors on the Devaronian.
Pretty cool fight scene. I love the flamethrower to the face and then the chuckle. I mean, just the devil aspect he has been kind of given. Berg takes Mando's face and rakes it across the control panel. Really, what does that really do to him? Nothing. So I don't necessarily understand. We see Mando using doors as the end game to his fights. Very creative, but pretty gruesome as well.
We got the payoff from earlier things in the episode. Clearly, he's super strong and very tough and kind of the boss fight guy. He's the one that's going to take a little extra effort to defeat. I thought it was interesting that for whatever reason, the flamethrower doesn't hurt him. To David's point, if you're the devil, fire probably shouldn't hurt you. Ultimately, using the blast doors, it's become sort of the Mando's signature move. He says, I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold, and I cut you in half with the door. I like that things are not necessarily coming easy to the Mando. A lot of these fights that he has, a lot of the episodes that we've seen so far, he does take a pounding. You can do it with this particular bad guy, the Berg Blurg, but I see a lot of characters taking a swing at the Mando, and if Beskar can deflect blasters and generally be that tough, it's not something you want to punch. So, note to the showrunners: let's get off of that for now. Let's not punch the Mando in the face anymore.
This wasn't just about beating him physically. I think he really wanted to humiliate Mando, and of course, this comes at the expense of winning the fight. Berg doesn't see it that way. He feels like he's just going to overpower Mando. But I thought that was interesting that he went for the helmet and the humiliation rather than breaking an arm or shattering a knee. I'm going to take your helmet off.
I don't know if that entirely makes sense. We've kind of established that he's the meathead of the crew. And I think he would be more about the snapping of bones and just the general brutality than any of that other stuff.
When the armorer gave him the whistling birds, it almost seemed like these were pretty rare and you would have to, I guess, get resupplied. So I'm curious as to how many whistling birds he got from the armorer for his work.
I think he bought a gross. I have no idea, but I had the same thought. I
That's
expected
awesome.
I expected to see them once until he crossed paths with the armor again. And to Berg, last point, I guess, before we move on. I don't know. It's classic bully. Yeah, I'd love to break arms and shatter knees, but he got shoved into the vac tube. He basically got pushed into the toilet. And I think he remembered that. That stuck with him. And bullies love humiliation. He calls the Mandalorian tiny. If they're such great warriors, why are they all dead? And then he gets shoved into the restroom. On the one level, it seems a little too sophisticated for him, but on another, it's like, yeah, that's what a bully would do. The bully would do the one thing that you've shown him you don't want him to do.
Yes, I would agree with that. But did we really establish that it's the one thing? Because there's sort of this conversation, with the people on on the ship, on the Razor Crest on the way in. There's this conversation that they have regarding the not taking the helmet off, but it seems to be more a general conversation regarding Mandalorian culture than it is specifically to Din Djarin. And he doesn't really react to a lot of the conversation about Mandalore because he knows that can be leveraged and used as a weakness. And so is it possible or plausible then that Berg would be able to come up with this on his own or through observation of the situation? Because it's been made clear to us, the audience, through the course of the season, the implications of removing the helmet and how important it is. But I don't think in this particular episode, beyond some jokes from Mayfeld and some snarky comments from the ex-girlfriend, I don't think it's really clear, like, this is the biggest and most important religious tenet of the Mandalorian's life is not taking off the helmet.
I don't know. The conversation on the Razor Crest, it was pretty clear, and they stayed on it for a while. Mayfeld kicks it over to Shion, a lady never tells, and then over to Berg. Mayfeld nods at him, the signal for Berg to approach Mando and take off the helmet by force, and that's what ends up getting Berg shoved into the vac tube. I think it's pretty clear.
You win, Jeff. You're fine.
I don't know.
I'll bet you the other Jeff would have agreed with you.
Shion is next. Her throwing knives have buttons and blue lights, so they must be some type of vibroblade. She knocks the Mando's pistol from his hand, but she cannot penetrate Beskar armor with her weapons. Once they reach close quarters, she quickly has a knife at her throat, and Din Djarin sneaks up on Mayfeld in a dark hallway.
Oh yeah,
I
Berg
actually
definitely...
like the throwing of the knife throwing with Shion, and it seemed like she actually did make contact with him, got him in the right shoulder. Once they get closer, you can see that he's like grabbing it out of his shoulder. But I thought it was pretty cool. I mean, especially I like the effect of the light. It's on the end of the knife, and you could very easily trace it. Would have I liked to have seen it go a little longer? Yes, but was it long enough? Yes.
Berg was a boss fight out of order in a way. Like, you probably should have taken care of the other two, and then got to Berg, and then gone on to Quinn as the final prey. It felt anticlimactic, really, to deal with the other two characters. I like the visuals of the Mayfeld approach. It definitely felt like a scene out of the original Alien film with the strobe lights and the darkness, and when the light flashes, he's way back, far away, and then when the light flashes again, he's like way closer, and then he turns around and then he's behind him, and it's like, yeah, it was good. It was all very good. I mean, it was visually well executed, but yes, the import of the battles, or the difficulty of the battles, or it felt out of order in a way.
Finally, Mando catches up to Quinn. The Twi'lek tosses his weapon aside and tries to negotiate with Mando. An appeal to honor and Din Djarin's personal need for credits is successful, but we won't know Quinn's fate until after the Mando deals with Zero on board the Razor Crest. Zero finds the child in Din Djarin's bunk, levels its blaster, but then, as the child raises one of its hands to use the Force, the droid's chest explodes and it falls out of the frame. A funny moment, the child looks at its raised hand in bewilderment, thinking for a split second it somehow destroyed Zero. However, the droid fell because Mando arrived and shot it from behind with his pistol.
I would have loved to have seen more of Zero. I mean, I feel like, it was underused, considering how cool it looked. Almost kind of brings you back to The Empire Strikes Back when the other bounty hunters didn't get used except for Boba Fett. But nice, cute wave with the child potentially blowing it up with the Force. I thought that was kind of cute. But the fact that Quinn is still alive and doesn't get left behind, I find a little disappointing. But I guess, the Mando realizes he has to get paid, and in order to get paid, he's got to bring Quinn back, and no questions asked, I believe. And that's really what it all comes down to, is getting paid.
I thought David would love the scene with Baby Yoda because it brings humor and jokes. And that's what David's all about. He wants more humor and jokes.
No, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan.
Which I find interesting because most of your critiques of pop culture / comic book / sci-fi films is there isn't enough humor. So anyway, having said that, it was a fun moment with Baby Yoda. We've seen him obviously use his Force powers. It's unclear whether he's fully aware of his Force powers or if he's fully able to control them in a way. He used them one time and then he had to sleep for 3 episodes, and then seeing him reaching out to try and stop this robot from causing him harm, and then he acts shocked when the robot explodes. So it's a fun moment. It's cute. We have to have our cute Baby Yoda moment because that's what this show is about. And so Din Djarin, of course, saving the day, which once again reinforces the bond between the two, which is great. The appeal by Quinn to the Mando didn't surprise me. I mean, we're at this point now where they're totally manipulating the Mando and all of his beliefs. Take me in, get your money. Aren't you a man of honor? Like all that kind of stuff. Again, all that worked. That felt appropriate. You almost kind of wonder in that moment, even though they were unsuccessful in betraying him earlier, is this ultimate manipulation of his core beliefs going to be his undoing? But we do know he's got to get back on the crest, and of course he gets to kill a robot, which I'm sure makes him very happy. I would like to say I didn't notice it initially, but when Zero grabs his rifle to follow Baby Yoda down into the ship, it's either a boss gun or it's
Boba Fett.
Boba Fett, which I thought was cool. Yeah, that was another fun little visual element there that they threw in.
Important choice of words. Quinn asks about the others, and the Mandalorian says they got what they deserved. So at this point, did you both believe that he'd killed them?
I thought that they were going to get put in jail. So I think we've seen Mando, for the most part, turn a new leaf. If that would have happened when Mando was more of a mercenary, I think very easily they could have been taken out. But not his own new style that he's come accustomed to.
Well, getting what they deserved. I mean, like you say, it is an interesting choice of words. I mean, these are very bad people, and they murder at will and don't really care about anything. So locking them in a cell on a derelict prison ship, maybe that is what they deserve. Maybe they deserve a cruel and unusual punishment. But I also think that the fact that the beacon was used initially and the Mando, of course, pockets it, I think that a signal has been sent to the New Republic that something's wrong on this ship. The New Republic will follow the signal to its source, but they will try and find this ship. It may be uncomfortable, and it may be a significant amount of time before the ship is recovered, but I don't think that he's trying to sentence them to death or anything like that. But it's going to be uncomfortable, and they're going to have to spend a lot of time thinking about what it is that they did. And then ultimately, when the New Republic finds them, they're going to have to pay for killing the guard and anything else they may or may not be on the rolls for, because now we've got 2 new criminals who have been added to the prison manifest, or 3 new, actually, prisoners. to replace the one that technically got away in Quinn. Yes, they're going to quote unquote get what they deserve. It's probably, they're going to get tried and put in some kind of jail type situation in the New Republic. So the statement that getting what they deserve is probably a reference to whatever kind of justice they will ultimately meet at the hands of the New Republic. But he's not making it easy, by locking him on this ship that's drifting in space or whatnot, like their own hubris or dishonesty or underhandedness or whatever has come back to bite them. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's an appropriate choice of words.
The Razor Crest returns to the roost where Ran is waiting in the hangar. Quinn strides down the ramp with a smirk and embraces Ran. When no one besides Din Djarin joins them, Ran asks, where are the others? The Mando reminds Ran of his own rule, no questions asked. That's the policy, right? Ran pays the bounty hunter, who continues to gloat by remarking, just like the good old days. As Din Djarin pilots the Razor Crest out of the hangar, Ran activates a comlink and orders, kill him. A gunship rises from a lower deck as Ran and Quinn laugh about the prospect of Mando's death. But Quinn finds the New Republic tracking beacon hidden in his pants at this point. Having never seen it before, he asks Ran, what's this? 3 New Republic X-Wings materialize with Dave Filoni, Deborah Chow, and Rick Famuyiwa as pilots. They've located the beacon, scanned the station, and detected a gunship. Ran's fear is evident as he tries to run from the hangar. The X-Wings lock S-foils in attack position and open fire, destroying the gunship and causing serious damage to the station. Yet we do not see its total destruction. Ran might survive this encounter with the New Republic. The Razor Crest makes the jump to hyperspace. Din Djarin hands the now famous metal knob to the child and jokingly says, I told you that was a bad idea.
All right, so multiple issues on multiple levels at this very end. First of all, when did the New Republic or the Old Republic or whatever the Republic is at this point become so black-hearted they don't even try to communicate with the station? They just lock S-foils and blow the place up. I mean, secondly, the 3 directors sitting in the X-Wings kind of took me out of the world of Star Wars, especially with the horrible acting. Just did not really like it. Using directors as actors isn't always necessarily the best thing to do. So please, in the future, please keep our directors and producers out of my X-Wings and off my screen. So, yeah.
The question here is, and I agree with David's concern, is, why do they just swoop in and blow everything up? And I don't have an easy answer, and I don't have a trite answer. The only thing that could be assumed is that this particular beacon is like a kill switch. It's one of these things where it's like, if it goes off, it means that it's like the last. Like, you can send a distress call, you can send out a radio message, you can, send out code from the ship. But when this thing goes off, it means everything has gone wrong. Again, that's not been established. That's me doing the writing for the writers. And so that's not an answer. But that would be the only thing that I could think of that would prompt the New Republic folks to just show up and blow the hell out of everything. There are concerns here about the New Republic and how it operates, and the fact that we're on a prison barge that belongs to the New Republic. This feels like a very imperial kind of thing to be a part of. And then these guys just show up and shoot first and ask questions later is also a very imperial thing. And it feels like that the New Republic is less enlightened than it thinks it is, or that they just started to figure out that running a galaxy is a lot harder than a bunch of idealist rebels and freedom fighters think it is. So when you find yourself in that position, you are now confronted with having to make the same choices and have to make the same decisions that any other ruling party or government would have to make. How do you establish law and order? How do you do crime and punishment? It's very interesting that, if you look at throughout history, the people who have often fought for independence from tyranny, once they assume power, they become just as tyrannical, if not more tyrannical, because they have to maintain their power. And so they become the thing that they hate. Like, I don't know, like what is this prison ship all about? The other thing that David brings up, and we had talked about it, I think this might have been off recording earlier, but the pilots at the end of this episode, yes, are directors of other episodes, and it's a fun nod to the original X-Wing pilots in episode 4, who were cast, crew, producers, like people who were around at Pinewood and Elstree and got thrown in a jumpsuit and said, "Sit here. We're gonna shake the cockpit and make it look like you're flying, and you say a couple of lines because it's like our last day of filming and we got to get this done or whatever." But man, Dave just sounded like you ruined his day by asking him to be in a Star Wars episode, and that him sitting in that cockpit was just the worst task that he's had to do in years. And because he's a director and because he's not an actor and because his background is not in acting, maybe that's just him trying to be cool and not freak out and be a fanboy and be like, I'm in a Star Wars episode. I mean, even though, yes, he's Mr. Star Wars. But then, of course, seeing the interview with him about it, he actually complains about being in this episode. It was frustrating because in an episode that was really, really good, it was, like we said before, it's one of the best episodes, to have that moment where at first you kind of geek a little bit because as a fan, you immediately recognize Dave Filoni. But then to have him kind of perform that way in that role was just, it was tough to watch.
The beacon doesn't justify opening fire. In fact, it might be the opposite. I mean, what if one of your, granted they only had one person alive on the ship, I guess, but what if one of yours is there with the beacon? And wouldn't have taken much to call to the station, Space Station XYZ, this is New Republic Task Force, stand down, that kind of thing. When they don't stand down, okay, it's justified to open fire. But yeah, it seemed very quick.
Move along. Move along.
Neither of you focused on the twist, planting the beacon on Quinn, a very smooth move.
Yeah, it was smooth. But you can hide anything in those parachute pants. By the time he actually unzips all the pockets on the parachute pants and finds it, they're dead. You do it. No, it was good. It was a total, just like in Casino Royale, right? Put the bomb on the guy's belt loop. It didn't feel like it was such a big thing to me in that moment. Like, we expected something. We expected some kind of payback. So when they found the beacon in the pants, like, okay, this is how he's going to do it, because Rand had set him up initially, right? Rand had set up this whole thing to get his buddy back and to put the Mandalorian away and maybe even steal his ship, right? And after we've seen the betrayal on the prison ship and all that subsequent nonsense, we understand that the Mando now knows what the plan was, and now he's going to get back at these people. And he started by leaving everybody on the ship, on the prison ship, and then now he's coming back and he's dropping off Quinn to get the money. And even though, he drops a few taunts or whatever, and he walks on the ship and takes off, we know that Rand is not going to let that slide. Clearly, he's also has a beef with the Mando. I don't know. It felt right. It didn't feel like a big reveal. It didn't feel like a big surprise or a plot twist or anything like that. It just felt like the Mando knew what was going on. He knew what he was walking into, and he knew he had to get these guys, take care of these guys somehow. It feels appropriate that he uses the New Republic as the weapon or the final gambit against these dudes.
I think, like I said, the biggest surprise was the X-Wings just coming out of hyperspace and just lighting them up. So
Berg, Mayfeld, and Xi'an are locked in a cell on the New Republic prison ship. Berg is laying down and clutching his head. A seated Mayfeld appears dejected. Xi'an is pacing and snarling. Will any or all be back for future episodes?
personally, I think all of them will return at some point. I was actually kind of surprised and disappointed that Berg was still alive. I think it would have been cooler if you would have just seen Mayfeld and Shion. But for my affection for Shion, I want another episode with her in it. You don't see often where you can tell a person's attitude with her eyes. That really is cool to me. The way she interacted with the other characters and the gestures with her eyes and things like that just made her to be a really interesting character. And I would really like to see her in a future episode.
I was surprised that the Berg survived, or Berg, or Mr. Berg survived. It was nice to see, though, that, I mean, his horns had been broken off, so like at least there was some damage to him being crushed by the blast doors. What we've learned before in the episode is that he's a tough dude and that he can survive a lot of stuff. Figure if you're going to get a flamethrower to the face and live, what's a little crushing by a door, and he can handle it. The other two, we saw the Mando best them. I would like to see these characters show up again, and maybe we have another situation where all of the bounty hunting guild is sent out after the Mando. Something in the future here where people are really looking for the Mando, and it's become sort of this all-out manhunt situation. Not just the Imperials are looking for him, but maybe now because of what went down on the prison ship, that the New Republic's looking for him. Yeah. So I could see them returning in that way. I don't know what other capacity that I would like to see these characters in. I mean, if there's something important to me, and this is something again that we've talked about over previous episodes, is that there's these moments where there's no real moving along of the story of Baby Yoda and the Mando. It's a Planet of the Week, Villain of the Week. Mando leaves at the end of this episode with a sack of cash, which will help him dealing with problems with his ship and fuel and bribing local officials and all the other things that he can use cash for in his journey. But it's a side episode, it's a side quest, and so I don't know where these characters could come in handy in the future as part of the quest. I don't have a big desire to see the spin-off show, these three and their adventures in New Republic prison or anything like that.
Speaking of spin-offs, Disney just announced a new project, Prisoners of the New Republic, 2022.
If Shion's in it, I'm in.
Apparently.
They call him Two Tubes.
So guys, believe it or not, this was the second longest episode of the season.
38 minutes.
43.
The irony, this is the one that was supposed to feel the fastest and came with a countdown.
Well, and it did.
This was time sensitive. It was long.
Well, it's funny because it felt like it moved. The urgency, that was created by the scenario of going onto the ship and then being up against trying to, the stealth mission, right? Getting on the ship, breaking the guy out, trying not to be discovered, just ultimately when everything goes sideways and then you get the beacon, the distress call, now you got a 20-minute countdown. It's it adds even more stress, perception and reality and whatever, but it's you're sitting in that episode and it feels like it's moving. Didn't feel like one of the longest.
I totally agree. I mean, they had some very clear benchmarks and it got them done. And I think that maybe is what helped it along with the story.
It's full of action, but it still feels character driven. It is my favorite episode of the first season. The second chapter and this sixth chapter, both directed by Mr. Famuyiwa, both excellent in my opinion.
So I would have to concur with Jeff. I mean, this was by far my favorite episode. But weirdly enough, I mean, it's only the third rated out of all 8 episodes of season 1. So people have their choices. They have their likes and dislikes, but I don't understand why the other episodes are beating it out in terms of ratings and things like that.
Could it be the lack of Baby Yoda? Because I know that is a huge
Probably.
thing with fans.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah, not everyone gets it. The child is absent for the most part. And when the child is there, the child is in peril. So if you tune in for the child, this is not the episode for you.
I think that maybe one of the reasons why, beyond the, like you say, the Baby Yoda being in peril, and that generally tends to worry the maternal instinct of the viewer, this show is also a sideshow. It's a side episode. It doesn't do a lot in moving the main storyline along. It's a huge episode when it comes to establishing more of the character and the character's history for the Mandalorian. It's massively important. It reinforces a lot of things that we have been told about the character, but it also opens us up to other possibilities, and it expands on his past, and we see another side of this character. And so it's a very rich episode when it comes to that. But David said, what, the third highest rated episode?
Yeah, the third lowest of the
Oh,
episodes.
lowest rated.
Third lowest.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that doesn't make a lick of sense, because the character performances, set design, and the execution of the special effects beyond maybe the guard droids or whatever, like a ensemble cast. It's got a lot of great acting. It's got good direction, great tension, great drama, like all that stuff. It's a great episode. I don't know why people don't like it.
And this is Internet Movie Database, so I don't know. I can do a deeper dive if you guys want at some point.
Well, we have another guest host waiting in the wings to replace you, David, so it's
Thank
fine.
you.
We've got Jeff and the other Jeff.
Sure.
It's going to be the J Squared show.
Double J.
It's like two tubes, but different.
Very different. If we just spent a little bit more time talking about Xi'an. So David, would you like to ask us your favorite question?
All right. Fellas, what would you rate this episode out of 10?
I'd give it a solid 8.5.
It's tough. Could I go all the way to 9.5? I don't think so. 9.
8.75.
So what? Okay, the 0.25 was the Filoni penalty, but we're balancing.
0.25 past light speed. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I could have given it a 9.
We talked about we offer a lot of criticism, but these are high scores. So clearly we all liked this episode. Why did you like it?
Personally, I think the simplicity of the story. I loved the space station scene. I loved also the interaction of the gang, and the benchmarks that they set forth were very clear and easy to understand, at least for me. And I thought the action was really well done. You had robots, you had aliens, you had the space station and the prison ship, and that's it. You didn't really move around, and it was pretty compact. So those are the things that I really enjoyed the most about this episode.
I thought all of the characters in the episode were well written, and other than obviously Trapper Wolf and the boys at the end, I mean, they were all very well acted. And yes, we nitpick, and we're fans, we're super fans, and we love Star Wars, and so we get into this and we dig in, and we probably give Star Wars more scrutiny than we do a lot of the other media that we consume in our lives, and so that's on us. And it does sound like sometimes that we're being unduly harsh, and then we come up with these high scores. But I think that this episode, the characters, the acting, it was very well directed. The cinematography was awesome. The scenery, the set design, it was a very cohesive episode. It didn't leave you with a lot of, real overt questions like that didn't make sense, or why did that even happen, or why are we here? And it never stopped feeling Star Wars all the way through. And especially with the Razor Crest landing and the interaction with Bad Santa, there was even kind of that janky movement of the X-Wings that didn't quite feel right, kind of like the old models from the 70s. It was all very well done. The nostalgia pieces were there. This series is doing really well. It's being self-referential without being overtly fanboyish, forced or shoehorned in, or any way out of place. That's why I really enjoyed this episode. This is so far by far my favorite episode in the season.
I agree with everything said. I'll put in a plug for the cast. I think the cast is excellent. So I guess just my one addition to comments already made. Our discussion of Mandalorian Chapter 6, The Prisoner, has come to an end. Thank you, David.
May the force be with you.
Thank you, Sean.
Be so like this.
Galactic Initiative is not authorized or endorsed by Lucasfilm Limited. The name Star Wars and all related materials are registered trademarks of Lucasfilm Limited, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, all rights reserved. Galactic Initiative is a registered trademark, and other product and company names are trademarks of their respective holders. Use does not imply affiliation or endorsement.